Welcome to Paranormal Gumbo with your hosts, Angel and Aaron.
Hey, welcome to Paranormal Gumbo. This is Aaron.
And this is Angel.
Where we talk about all things paranormal and try to add a little dose of humor.
A big dose of humor.
There you go.
Aaron, let's talk about news, paranormal news.
Hey, what's new in paranormal news today?
Well, I actually have an exciting piece of information. Remember when we talked about the Loch Ness Monster and Champ?
Yeah.
We left off that the scientists in somewhere, I don't know where, scientists somewhere, they collected a bunch of DNA.
Scientists in Scientistville?
Scientists and science, or maybe from the planet Science.
Maybe,
because I like space stuff a lot.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see, I've always thrown some space news in there. Anyways, but they did collect all this DNA. They were going to analyze it and see if they could figure out if there was something in there that they couldn't recognize, maybe some kind of huge reptile or whatever. They did get that DNA study completed, and they found no monster, no unknown DNA at all. They found no reptile DNA.
What about a Wells catfish?
Sorry, you're wrong on that one. They found no giant catfish or sturgeon DNA.
What about seals? Maybe a seal?
Well, they didn't say specifically seals. They said that they did find some animals and birds and even human DNA. And they also found a lot of eel DNA, a ton of eel DNA. So they found so many eels, and they've speculated before that maybe Nessie is like a giant eel or something. So maybe so. But obviously it's not a reptile. It's not any kind of, unknown creature, no plesiosaur or anything like that, because they would have found something.
Yeah, they would have figured that out with the DNA.
Right. So, that's actually I have to say, one of the most important studies, I think, in paranormal terms that we've had lately, because that really changes the way that you look at things. Now, not saying Nessie still can't be some sort of a spirit or something that appears, because you never know with that kind of thing. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it's not.
My whole thing with the whole spirit thing is, the way it interacts with the water.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'm more than likely, I think it's going to turn out to be some sort of a big eel, and that would explain the humps. If it's some sort of a big eel, then it can have humps.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a big enough eel that it can have those humps.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyways, enough on Nessie. I'm sad about that. This next story is interesting. I don't know exactly when it happened, but I did get it from the Daily Ghoul, which is a cool little site that tells about, different things going on with the paranormal and that kind of thing. And they have a story that there was this man, and he was working outside. He got tired, so he just said, well, let me take a nap. He went inside. He laid down on his bed. He didn't go to sleep. He's kind of just looking up at the ceiling, and he hears some rustling over to the side of the bed. So he looks over, and he sees like this tiny little person.
Oh, what?
Yeah. So this tiny little person apparently was rummaging through like some newspapers and stuff he had.
Just catching up on the news.
Exactly. Tiny people need to know.
Yeah.
Anyways, so he kind of slowly tried to get up to where it didn't hear him.
Yeah.
And that didn't really work
impossible.
real well. It's like, and he said it just took off and went through the wall.
Ooh, what?
Like a spirit or something. But he said that it just vanished. But he said it was small. It didn't say how tall it was, but that it was really tiny, and that it was wearing like brown colored rags.
Yeah. So it's a house elf.
It's a what?
A house elf.
Maybe. But
it's like Dobby.
Dobby, sir. Dobby the house elf.
Well, and people do say that elves and fairies and things like that are in another dimension.
Yeah.
So they're not really physical like we are. So maybe that's why it could go through the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, it's tangible
they're
enough that it
physical,
can-
but not in the same sense that we are.
Yeah, it can go tangible enough that it can mess with the newspaper, but whenever it wants to go through a wall, it's just like...
Right. They're
gonna
supposed to
yeet
be
the shit
made out
outta
of
here.
this really fine material that's way finer than anything we're made out of. But anyways, he said that it looked pretty much like the little beings in the Stephen King movie Cat's Eye. And I've seen that, but I can't remember. It's been so long ago.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah. So that was kind of interesting. And then it's cool because apparently the old man that they bought the property from had an experience as well, but it was when he was a child.
Yeah.
He was out playing by the creek, and he heard people talking. And he's like, not sure what's going on because there's not supposed to be people right there. So he kind of peeked around to where he heard it coming from, and he saw a group of tiny people, about a foot tall, he said. And he said they were just talking, and they were acting real serious. He didn't say what they said. I guess they probably spoke another language. Who knows? But he said they were wearing dark green and brown clothes, and that they just were talking really serious. And then one of them let out a whistle, and more came out from a dead fallen tree from like around that, and they were all talking, and then they all just walked away and kind of disappeared walking down by the creek. So that's pretty much the story, but it's interesting. I mean, if that's true, then it would lead some...
Yes, I'm envisioning
it could be some little fairies or elves, like you say.
I'm envisioning the brownies from Willow.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we go that way, to the lake! That way. You are drunk, and when you are drunk, you forget that I am in charge.
Fine, then which way do we go? That way!
Well, there may be something to that kind of thing because every culture just about has something like that.
It's just like dragons. Every culture's got something on dragons.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not going to say, whether that... I don't know how I feel about it, but, it's very well could be true.
As we go into the rabbit hole here on the all the paranormal shit that's happening around the world, I'm starting to see that every culture's got pretty much
the same
thing. Yeah,
stuff.
Every culture's got something on mermaids.
They may call it a little bit different and have a few little different things, but the same stuff.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah,
it's
okay, Angel.
Have the same
I'm used to it.
I think we're starting to share a brain.
That's horrible. That's a scary
neither one of us
thing.
have that much.
No. Hey, maybe between the two of us, we've got half of one.
Quarter, maybe.
If we're
Quarter
lucky.
tops.
If we're lucky.
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
So, I don't know. So, do you believe in things like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I kind of lean towards that, too, that it's something. Now, whether it's an entity of its own or if it's something just like a spirit just making itself look like that, I don't know.
See, I don't know about it being a spirit looking like that. I don't know about them being from an alternate dimension. I think maybe they're from this realm, but they're just so freaking good at hiding.
Could be like mice. You see the signs of mice, but
you never
do you actually see
you never
the
see them.
mouse.
Yeah,
unless you got them bad.
Yeah.
So
unless you're really looking for a mouse, you're not going to really see it.
Yeah, and they're so cute. But
I mean, what about this? What about this? Mm-hmm. It's like with the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. Mice are actually tiny little people, kind of like this guy described, but they can make themselves look like mice.
Earthman, the planet you inhabited was commissioned, paid for, and run by the mice.
You never know. Yeah, that's definitely a cool thing to think about. And I had another thought, and I don't remember what it was.
Yeah. This is why we don't have brains between us.
This is why. Okay. If you have any spooky stories at all, I don't care if you saw Bigfoot, if you were abducted by aliens or saw aliens or, ghosts or whatever, send it in to us. You can read it and talk about it on air, or we can keep you, we can keep it anonymous and we can just talk about it. Or even if you just want to send it to us and don't give us permission to air it, we'd love to know. So you can send that in to paranormalgumbo@gmail.com and check out our website at paranormalgumbo.com. It's a pretty cool website. We've got lots of stuff up there. We've got a section where you can submit a form and tell us about a story or just give us a comment, positive or negative. We love feedback so that we can make our show better. We've got some T-shirts up in the shop on the website, so you can buy a T-shirt. We've got stuff on every episode that we do. We put all kinds of information up on our website. We put pictures, we put links, we put just information that we can find. So check that out. And also, you can donate money via PayPal on our site if you'd like. That money goes towards making our show better. We can go to different places and investigate better, we can investigate haunted areas and things like that. We can get better equipment and just more things for you guys. Also, a new thing for us is Patreon. You can go to our website and click on the Patreon tab, and you can actually become a patron. And if you donate $5 or more per month, then you get lots of stuff. You get behind the scenes. You get behind the scenes footage, you'll get some video stuff, you'll get some stories, you'll get some extra short episodes. You'll also get registered into a drawing to win a T-shirt. We'll be giving away a T-shirt every month. So we have a special episode for you today. We have Lon Strickler, who is a Fortean researcher. He researches cryptids, spirits, aliens. Yeah, he's into all that. He's got a website called phantomsandmonsters.com where he has a blog where he writes every single day.
Yeah.
He puts out new information. He talks about black-eyed kids. I think today
tens of thousands of visitors every day.
Yeah,
is what he gets.
It's a huge website. It's a huge blog. You may already even be familiar with it and his work. He is also a writer. Yep. He's written several books, which we'll talk about in the interview, and just a fascinating person who really has his hooks in the whole paranormal community. Really,
as a whole.
He's just kind of all over the place with it, and very experienced. Just kick back and listen to our interview with Lon Strickler.
Yep, we talk about everything from black-eyed kids to Mothman.
Be back later on to wrap it up. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself for our audience that may not have been introduced to you yet?
Well, I have been involved with paranormal now for almost 40 years. I am an intuitive. I've known I was an intuitive since I was around 8 years old. I was mostly involved in hauntings as such, starting back into the mid-'70s. I was doing investigations on my own back then, which was uncommon because anybody that was caught doing something like that, investigating hauntings, was thought to be a nut. So, and it's not like it is nowadays. It's very mainstream now. But I had when I moved down to Maryland, I was born and raised in Pennsylvania near Gettysburg, which is where I am right now. But anyway, when I moved down to Maryland, I had an encounter back in 1981 with a Bigfoot in Sykesville, Maryland. And that kind of got me, after that had occurred, that got me interested in the cryptids. And I started doing investigations, especially with this particular Bigfoot that had been seen in the area for years. And I got involved with starting to research that a bit. And, it just led to where I am now. Now, I started the blog back in 2005. And, I had collected all these reports and such over the years. So some people taught me into doing a blog, and, that's where we are now.
And that's phantomsandmonsters.com, correct? Yeah, that's a really interesting blog. You've got all kinds of stuff that you put on your blog. I love the blog. That's how I found you to begin with, is the blog. I've been reading it for quite a little while now, so it's really cool. For anybody who hasn't checked it out, check that out, phantomsandmonsters.com. We're a pretty new podcast. We've got like 13 episodes. This is going to be our 14th episode.
Number one.
So yeah, and we just kind of talk about everything paranormal pretty much, and we try to have a little fun with it too. But we try to get a little serious and be a little funny.
Okay. Well, we can talk about anything. Whatever you want to talk about, we'll talk about.
Well, you know what? One thing that I heard, I listened to your latest episode on your podcast, and we are actually from the Mississippi Gulf Coast, in the area that was majorly affected by Katrina. We're here where Biloxi is and all that. So you had mentioned that you had people that have contacted you saying that they were abducted, and I think you said that they said that they were being trained for crowd control and things like that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can talk about that.
So, you've had a lot of people who have contacted you?
Well, there's one guy in particular that I talked to who was a former New Orleans police officer who was one of these abductees, and he lives in Chicago now. But he has contacted me and several other researchers about him being abducted at one point by these reptilians and being trained. And quite frankly, he's not the only person that I've heard this from. There have something was definitely going on down there, and there were also and the locations were in fact, the one location was an abandoned mall down south into I guess that's Jefferson Parish down there below New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know exactly what was going on, but I have heard a lot of stories. I've heard stories about these so-called alligator people that people were running into during the floods in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what people were seeing, but there were a lot of stories coming out of there.
I tell you, it was definitely a surreal time. I mean, I can say that it was about as close to a simulation of the end of times, as you can get without really being living.
Yeah, I knew a lot of people that were down there at the time, and some of the stories are horrific.
It was crazy. We never really saw anything paranormal myself. What about the grunch? Have you heard it? Did you hear anything about grunch sightings?
What sightings?
Grunch, or I don't know if you've heard of it. The chupacabra from New Orleans.
No, I haven't heard about that.
Well, we had never heard about that either until recently. And, we were trying to figure out something, some things to do, shows on that people didn't know about. And apparently there's a chupacabra being called the grunch that's been seen in New Orleans since the 1800s, the early 1800s, which is weird considering chupacabras, I think it was, the 90s when they started talking about that. So.
Yeah. I don't know. These so-called chupacabras that people say they are, is not really what people are seeing, but they just go ahead and give it that name.
Yeah, they don't know what it is. So
the chupacabra is it's like an alien-like being that originated down in Puerto Rico, and every time somebody sees a canine-like being, a canine-like entity, they always say it's a chupacabra, so I don't know.
Yeah, I hate that where they say it's the chupacabra and it's the coyote with mange or whatever, and
Well, they have what they're called these blue dogs, and basically what they are, they're a hybrid species. Mm-hmm. They're a mixture between a coyote and a Mexican wolf.
Right.
And that is what people have been seeing. When people say they shot something, it's usually always that hybrid that shows up.
Which in my book is not really the chupacabra.
Yeah. such.
Yeah. And tomorrow night, I think it is it tomorrow night or the next night, you've got your show comes out. It's Friday, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Friday at 9 o'clock Eastern. It's Arcane Radio. I do a live show, but it's recorded, and then I put a podcast out.
What would you say is maybe the most, as an intuitive, one of the most interesting things that have happened to you, as far as your intuitive abilities?
Well, it was, it's something I really didn't dwell on that much. The day I discovered that definitely something was going on was when I was 8 years old. I used to spend a lot of time on the Gettysburg battlefield when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And I would ride my bike to the battlefield, spend most of the day there just going here and there. And I was in one specific location, which people call Death Valley, which is between the Little Round Top, Devil's Den, and the wheat field. Mm-hmm. It's kind of an area that there's a lot of action, a lot of activity there during the second day of the battle, Gettysburg. And for whatever reason, it was a really hot day. It was in July, but it wasn't the same day in which the battle, had occurred. But it was in July, and all of a sudden, I just started seeing movement around me, hearing cannon fire, gunfire, screams, smell of gunpowder, smell of blood. It was the whole 9 yards. It seemed like everything came to life. So, that day is the day I really knew something was going on. But, as I got older, I really didn't dwell on that much. I mean, it's not like I lived in a haunted house or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But as, when I got older and started, getting through high school and then graduating, I would do some private investigations. When people found out about what I did through, word of mouth and all, so I would do that, and that's what I did for a number of years, and I still do it on occasion. But most of the work I do now, as far as hauntings, possessions, and such, are done remotely. But like I said, when I had my Bigfoot experience back in '81, that kind of expanded everything for me, and then I started looking into the cryptid activity and kind of basically all genres of the paranormal and supernatural.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also interesting, and the more, I don't know about you, but the more I find out about it, the more it seems like so much of it is way more linked than we really necessarily realize.
Oh, I believe the paranormal is linked in so many ways. Yeah. Just for instance, when I'll be involved with a case, and there are many times, let's say some people say it's a haunting or such, and I'll go in there and discover that it may very well be something else. And in fact, I have that has happened on occasion. It may be something that's extraterrestrial related, and vice versa. And we run into cryptid activity in which there's some type of spiritual or extraterrestrial, extra dimensional aspect to it as well. So the paranormal is pretty well connected on with all genres, and a lot of and particularly nowadays, a lot of the investigators and researchers will acknowledge that.
Yeah, I've noticed that is becoming more and more the norm, for people to have that point of view.
Have there been any more sightings or mass sightings of Mothman in Chicago? I was reading up a little bit on you in 2017, and apparently they had a lot of Mothman sightings in Chicago. I'm just wondering, are they still happening, or?
Yeah, that Mothman moniker kind of got stuck in there. It wasn't really what people would consider a Mothman. It was a winged humanoid of some type. There were 3 sightings in 2011, and then things calmed down. Those happened in the city itself too. But in 2017, there were a few reports that started coming in of people encountering or seeing these these winged humanoids or winged beings. They, for the most part, they were described as a 5 to 6 foot humanoid, thin in stature, kind of emaciated, but it had legs and arms. Sometimes detached arms, sometimes the arms were connected to the wings. The wings themselves had a wingspan of up to 10 to 12 foot. Wow. And most times they were called or said to be like a bat wing or a gargoyle wing, and with that type of membrane. So that's the brunt of what was being seen. As far as now, we will occasionally get a sighting. Most of the sightings have been outside of Chicago. They're I'd say within 200 miles of Chicago, up in Wisconsin, in Illinois, and Indiana. And we have been looking into those sightings and encounters as well. Now, at the end of 2017, at the time I wrote the book, Mothman Dynasty, Chicago's Winged Humanoids, we had been up to around 55 sightings. Yeah. And these were sightings that we considered to be valid. At this point right now, we're around 85. Wow. And we are occasionally getting a sighting. And most of the times what people are sending are older sightings that happened a year or so before, that we will go ahead and make an account of and post. We've got the interactive map that I plot all the sightings at, with the link back to the actual description of the incident. So, we're at this time right now, one of the investigators I work with, who's in the Fans of Monsters Fortean Research, Tobias Whalen, he's written a book titled The Lake Michigan Mothman, and that book's coming out soon. So he's recounting all the sightings till date. And I'm actually working on a flied cryptid book myself, and I'll be updating the previous book as far as the sightings in and around Chicago, plus other cryptid, winged cryptids, flying cryptids as well.
Yeah, do you have any idea why we may be seeing more of them now than in the past, or?
I think, first of all, the sightings in Chicago, that was very unusual and not common, because it was an urban area. We've never, that I know of, had a winged humanoid, a bunch of winged humanoid sightings in one location, especially in the city. Now, of course, back in '66 and '67, you had the Point Pleasant sightings of the Mothman. There were around 30 confirmed sightings, or what were called confirmed sightings at that time. And but ever since then, there have been sightings in and around Mason County in West Virginia and the surrounding counties and the Point Pleasant area, and all different locations up and down the Ohio River. We had sightings all through the country. We had a spat of sightings here in Pennsylvania, which I discovered because I had an encounter with one of these things as well back in '88. It was very similar to what people were seeing in Chicago. And, of course, we've had other sightings. At the same time as the sightings in Chicago, there were a trio of sightings in Pasco County, Florida, that were reported to me, and several other sightings scattered throughout the country. Why this is happening, I have no idea. I mean, I believe that these may be interdimensional beings, but I do believe they're flesh and blood. And the reason I say that is because we have had at least 2 witnesses who have reported seeing this thing flying and then suddenly disappearing, like it went through an invisible doorway.
Yeah. That'd be interesting to see right there. I'd love to see it.
A lot of people would. Yeah. The whole Mothman thing. Has there been any mention of of Indrid Cold with the more recent winged humanoids?
Nothing to that extent, no.
Okay, that's just kind of a thing I'm kind of a little bit interested in, but I don't think there's been any mention of that, to my knowledge, since that whole original Mothman situation has.
Yeah. The Intercold story is kind of bizarre. Of course, John Keel and had basically incorporated all that into the Mothman prophecies of it, eventually. But it's another aspect of a lot of the weird activity that was going on around there, because it just wasn't the Mothman. There were a lot of UFO sightings. Of course, the Men in Black. There's a lot of paranormal activity going on. So, like I said, it just wasn't one type of bit of activity. It was a lot of different things going on.
Yeah, it's strange how there's so many. It's clusters of things seem to happen at once. It's really strange. Now, let me ask you this. We do a story every episode where we either do a reader story or we find a story on the internet where it's supposed to be a real ghost story and things like that. And one of them that we talk about on this episode, it's just kind of interesting, but we talk about a man who said that he saw like tiny foot-tall humanoids. Have you heard any reports of anything like that?
There have been little people sightings for many, many years. Even back into antiquity.
Right.
These entities, could they be like fairies or be like little people? Mm-hmm. Who knows? I've gotten reports over the years of these things. Could they be extraterrestrial? Sure, they could be. You do get a whole group of different types of small humanoid sightings, small people sightings, but it's just part of everything I do get. When I get it, I look into it.
Wow. So would those continue to come in to this day then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, I have kind of a weird thing that happened to me. I just thought you might be interested in, and I'm kind of curious if you've heard any other situations like this, because this really doesn't fit in with most of what I see. But I had a situation where, and poor Aaron, he's heard this story a zillion times, but he'll have to hear it a zillion and one. But I was asleep one night. It was about 2:00 in the morning, and my husband woke me up. He worked night shift, so he was up, and he woke me up. He said, I need you to come look at something. And I'm grumbling, not wanting to get up that time of morning. He won't tell me what he wants me to see. Well, he takes me to the front door, and he opens the door. He said, what do you see? And I said, oh my gosh, let's go back inside right now. I see some kind of being, and it scared me to death. But basically he didn't want to influence me one way or the other. But what we saw was this tall, maybe between 6 and 7 foot being that glowed silver, and it had long fingers. It was skinny, and it was doing weird stuff with its hands. Like, the only thing I can say is like if it were manipulating energy or something like that. Uh-huh. And it like glared at us with this horrible glare, and we didn't hear words or anything, but it's almost like it was communicating with us to back the heck off, or something really bad was going to happen. Yeah. I've seen things. I'm probably not to the point of your intuitive, probably not that much, but at least a little bit. I've seen things off and on my whole life, and things don't scare me, but that scared me. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, I had a camera right there, and I had binoculars right there to get a closer look. I made a conscious decision. I'm not messing with that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I get a lot of different type of humanoid sightings, and what you've described is kind of runs the course of what I get.
Really?
These glowing type beings, tall and thin like beings, that some may consider to be a species of the gray or another type of alien being. People do report these things. Mm-hmm. You may have very well came in contact with one of these. When you opened the door, where was it exactly? How far from you was it?
Probably about, and I'm not a really good person to estimate this kind of thing, but I would think maybe about 20 feet or so.
Oh, that's pretty close.
So it was really close. It was really close, and it it was really dark because we live out in the country, and let me tell you, Aaron can attest. Weird stuff happens there. We kind of have assumed there's probably like a portal there because so many weird things happen. But my husband kind of thought that it was like some sort of an interdimensional thing because it seemed to be manipulating energy or something. That's just the feeling we got. I have no idea, but I hadn't heard of that, so it's interesting that you've actually heard of those before.
Oh yeah, that it probably was some type of portal traveler or some type, unless you saw a craft or there was a craft or something, or an open portal that you noticed. But yeah, it does happen. I mean, people run into all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't know. I got a lot of weird reports. You think about it sometimes, and I usually give people, these witnesses the benefit of the doubt on anything. Mm-hmm. I let them tell me the story. I don't ask a whole lot of questions, frankly, because I don't want them embellishing on what they saw. Yeah. But after I hear them out and I get all what they want to tell me, then I'll start asking questions and getting into it. But frankly, nothing surprises me anymore, to be quite honest with you. I have heard, and I've seen a few things over the years, but I've probably heard about everything. And it, quite frankly, I would say no day goes by in which I hear something different about something.
Wow.
It's just some of the crazy stuff people have seen and can't explain. Mm-hmm. That's what keeps us going.
Such a strange world we live in.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of a world within a world within a world. I mean, I don't believe there's just one dimension. Just the Earth plane. I believe there are several dimensions, several realities in which intermingle or connect sometimes, and I think that's the reason why we get so much different type of unexplained entities or situations, because I think that at some point the veil thins out and somehow whatever is out there kind of comes into our reality, and that's what people report.
Right. Well, what do you think about, kind of going in with that, the whole Mandela effect?
I think it has a lot to do with, reality, the changes in reality or the connections of reality. I think that it's a real phenomena. Mm-hmm. I've heard a lot of different takes on it over the years, but I think it's probably can be explained as being two different realities. In other words, one person, you see something, you think what you saw really did happen. It probably did, but there's no real evidence that it did,
Right.
So the Mandela effect is a strange phenomenon. But if you go back into history and look into other reports of phenomena, that it has happened before. It's just not something that is that is going on now. It's been going on.
Oh, we just kind of notice it more with our computers and that kind of.
Well, yeah, and as far as people that report the paranormal, they're more inclined now to report because all the paranormal stuff on TV now, on the internet, there's social media is there. It's easy to find people to report things to. It's easier for us to get our name out there to collect reports. So, and to distribute reports like with the blog and such. So, people are more inclined to, tell you something that may have happened to them. The one thing that makes me wonder is how many people aren't telling you what's going on.
Yeah.
So,
That's true. I mean, we were looking at that study just on ghosts and I don't remember who did the study now. We just talked about it, but it was in 2017. And I think it was like 54% of the people believe in ghosts, and I think that's way higher than that because people don't want to, everybody's not talking about it yet.
Well, I think most people have some type of unexplained incident at some point in their life. They may not admit to it, but I think that they do.
Yeah, I agree.
Is there something that you can tell us about the strangest thing that you've seen that you've got absolutely no way of explaining? What would that be?
Well, I had mentioned earlier that I had an encounter with an unknown winged being back in 1988. This happened in the autumn of 1988. I had actually been living near Baltimore, and I ran into a friend of mine who I had been in Boy Scouts with when we were kids. So we met up with each other, and we were sitting down at this exhibition outside of Baltimore for Boy Scouts, and we were talking. And, after we talked a while, he had known I had done paranormal research, mostly as when I was younger. And he asked me if I heard of, some of the activity that had been going on at Camp Conewago, which is a Boy Scout camp up here in Adams County, Pennsylvania, not far from Gettysburg, as a matter of fact. And he said that some of the boys had been reporting hearing crying sounds, and it got to the point that they were spooked so bad that they left their campsites early. So he had asked me, he said he and a friend of his, another scout leader, were going to camp out at Camp Conewago the next weekend to kind of investigate and see what was going on and wonder why people, these kids were hearing, all these screams and these sounds. So, I said, fine. So I met up with him next weekend. I met up with him and another guy at the campground. This was a Friday. And, he asked me, he said, well, you're going to stay the whole week? And he said, we might, it might take us a couple days to get any idea what was going on. I said, yeah, I'm game. So we went ahead and got our gear and hiked into the woods. And we went along the trail that went along Conewago Creek, near the fork of the Conewago Creek, and we set up camp. And these woods are, even to this day, they're really thick. It's a lot of wildlife and all in there. So we set up 3 tents, got a fire going, ate some dinner. And by that time, it was around 7 in the evening. It was dusk. So, we decided to stay around the camp for the remainder of the night. So, and the first night was uneventful, though I had a feeling something was watching us. You just get that,
oh yeah,
I don't know, they call it sixth sense or something, but I thought something was hanging around there that we didn't know about. So the only thing that had happened that night was that we had heard, the next morning when we woke up, me and the other guy had heard something walking around in the campsite. Now, I thought it might have been one of them getting up to relieve himself or whatever in the middle of the night, so I didn't think anything of it. But none of us had gotten up, so that was a little strange. But nothing in the campsite was disturbed or, nobody saw anything, so we didn't worry about it. So anyway, we decided to hike through the woods that day, and we hiked. I don't know how many miles we went, but we were everywhere, just looking at a few things here and there. Mm-hmm. And we stayed out most of the day, and we got back, I guess it was about 6 o'clock. And we sat down, talked a little bit about anything that came to our heads. We thought by that time, this is Saturday, and we're not gonna see anything. So later that evening, we were sitting around the fire. Actually, we were talking about football, and suddenly we heard a scream come from downstream, and it was weird because it kind of came in and out. Now, I thought it was an owl at first, but it sounded off again, and it really did sound like a child screaming. And it was coming in and out. This is around 11 o'clock by this time. So we figured, well, we're staying up the rest of the night. Maybe we'll get an idea what this thing is. So we got hunkered down by the fire, sitting there talking, wondering what that was that screamed. And I guess around an hour and a half or 2 hours later, about 1 o'clock, I got up and started walking around the campsite. And then again, I was getting this feeling that something was watching us. So anyway, it was, I don't know if it was a full moon or not, but it was light enough from the moonlight that, the creek and the woods were fairly visible.
Mm-hmm.
So I was walking around the perimeter, had this funny feeling. So I walked back. I sat down. I told him, hey, why don't we take a walk around? I just got this strange feeling. So, okay. So we each had a flashlight. We walked up and started walking up the trail, one behind the other. And, we didn't get more than maybe 50 foot off the campsite onto the trail when we looked to our right and saw two red eyes. And, I mean, they were bright, standing or whatever was coming from the middle of the creek. Now, the creek at this time of year was really shallow. But it was standing in the creek. We could tell it was a humanoid-like form, but by the time we got the flashlights on this thing, it suddenly jettisoned straight up into the air. It was an audible whooshing sound. You could hear it. And when it went up in the air, a couple seconds later, we heard it scream. And then it went away, you could hear it screaming as it went away.
Yeah.
Oh.
So we got back to the campsite. Now, my friend, he was shook. He wasn't even talking. He had no idea what the hell this thing was. The other guy was, he was pretty well lucid. He was, we talked, we all saw the red eyes. And he stated that, it looked like there were some kind of structures on its back. And I noticed that too. And I just assumed they were wings. But when this thing took off, there's no way these wings came out. It just jettisoned up into the air quickly too. So, my friend, we had to prod him a bit to get him to talk, but by that time he was scared. He didn't want to stick around there. So him and the other guy, they went up to the administration building on the camp's administration building, and stayed up there the rest of the night. But I wanted to see what the hell this thing was. Yeah. I didn't know, I had no idea what it was. I had heard about the Mothman, and the stories that came out of there for years. And, I can't really say I was that, I really was interested in that type of phenomenon, or that phenomenon in particular. But, after that day I was. And, it's interesting because these sightings have continued along the Conewaga Creek, which actually runs about 15 miles till it goes downstream and empties into the Susquehanna River. But I have received 5 sighting reports along the creek, and I think the last one was about 3 years ago. But the interesting thing was, this had happened in '88, and then around 2008, I decided to go ahead and write about this on my blog. So I wrote about it on the blog, the whole story. And I got an email from a man who lived nearby there, and he told me, he said, I've been hearing these screams for years, and they're still going on. Wow. And he said, I never knew what it was, but I've heard about it. I've heard it, and then when I saw what you had written, I had to contact you. I said, well, great, But it was another interesting thing was a couple weeks later, I received another email from a troop leader, scout leader. And he just telling me that he had recently been out at Camp Conewaga with his troop. And that one afternoon, a bunch of the boys were out on the trail, and they came running back and were all shook up. And they said that they saw something that they called a dragon that was about 6 foot tall with wings and a tail, but it looked like it had fur or feathers. And he thought they were just playing games with him, and he didn't think about too much beyond that. but they did seem like they were shook up. So, but after he read my account, then he knew they probably saw something. So over the years, people have seen this thing or glimpses of it. The red eyes, especially, it's kind of got this moniker now, old red eye, what they call it. And, I don't know what it is, but from what I saw, and it was very similar to the Mothman description, but though I didn't get that real great a look at it, but it was very much like what people had seen in Chicago all these years later. And especially that, there were a lot of those had red eyes, but they all seemed to have this ability to jettison quickly into the air without unfurling the wings.
Oh.
Now, what that's about, I have no idea.
It's kind of crazy. That's kind of weird.
That's interesting.
Now, going back to this, just one more question that I'm going to add on to this, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Angel. You said it was watching you. You felt like you were being watched.
I just felt like I was being watched. Yeah.
In your travels, whenever you're investigating these sort of things, you ever feel like you might be threatened, like you might be attacked by some of these things?
Not necessarily. I haven't been threatened. Now, I have done remote cases as far as hauntings or oppressions, poltergeist activity, where I have been in a remote view session, and I have had physical psychic attacks. That has happened on occasion. Literally to the point where I actually had a laceration show up on my chest at one point, and I also had severely bruised ribs on my right side as well. These psychic attacks can happen remotely.
Yeah,
I'm talking about doing a case like several thousand miles away, and you're doing the remote view session, and you're affected by it.
Yeah,
that does happen.
I love that. Nothing physical, but psychic. You've been attacked, you've been harmed, but nothing physically, nothing up front. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah,
I love that though. Maybe the stuff that we're seeing isn't here to hurt us. It's just curious, like we are.
Well, I think there is evil out there. I don't necessarily go out and talk about demons and things to that order, but evil is evil, and you will run across some energies at some point that have some malevolency to them.
Yeah,
and they can be a problem, and but you got to protect yourself.
Yeah. It's kind of like with people. You can't just generalize everything as it's all good. You do have people that are evil, and just like this, you're going to have things out there that are the same way. They want to do harm to you.
Yeah, I think most cryptids in general, I believe that they are an interdimensional type of being. People talk about Bigfoot and then the interdimensional theories about Bigfoot. But I do believe they are flesh and blood. But I think there are also indigenous Bigfoot in certain areas. In particular in here in North America, the Pacific Northwest, down in your region along the Gulf Coast, down into Florida, some points in Canada. I think they are actual indigenous beings. But I think the majority of the sightings and encounters are of these of some type of interdimensional being. I really do. As years go by, this is something in the Bigfoot community that very few people talked about or even believed. But people are starting to become more open-minded about it, and we've been having these upright canine dogman sightings now, and they've been increasing throughout the country, and I believe that as well. I think that's an interdimensional species of some type. So, like I said before, these genres kind of mix in together, and but some of the aspects to these sightings are just too much on the supernatural side to ignore it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, going back to the spiritual beings and that kind of thing. Have you had any success with smudging?
I don't smudge.
You don't smudge?
I leave that to the elders or a shaman to do smudging. I have, I think it may help at some point for short term. Mm-hmm. But, the white sage smudging or anything, I just don't buy into all that. Mm-hmm. I think there has to be another aspect to it as far as, ritual that's been used by a shaman or someone who is used to doing that. And, but for the layman, I don't believe smudging really does that much. And if it does have an effect, it doesn't last long.
Right. Right. I think with sometimes with things like that too, it's not so much about the sage itself or whatever as the intent, your intent and your, maybe your abilities and that kind of thing. I think this, in my opinion, I think the sage is just more of a to help get you in the right place. You know what I mean?
And I think that's true. I mean, I think these energies, when you get involved with using some type of divination or using some other type of tool, say it incense, smudging, crystals, anything as far as, using some type of tool to calm these spirits down, that's what you're trying to do for the most part, unless you're going to actually go into a process to where you're trying to move these energies into another realm. But most people are just trying to calm things down, and that's why I say most times when people use a smudge or go through some type of affirmation and such, it's done to calm things down for a short period of time. But invariably they usually start back up again. Yeah,
that's how it seems to be to me too. That very, very seldom is it a situation where things just stop forever, in a location or whatever. Like you say, maybe you appease things or whatever for a little while, but they pop back up.
Yeah, I mean, when you're doing something like that, you got to really know what you're doing. I mean, as far as if you're going to, get rid of something, liquidate some type of force or energy, it takes specific means or rituals to do that. Mm-hmm. So, I've been working on a case now. It's been a stubborn case, but unfortunately, most cases I do get involved with, the people that are being affected by it are usually someone who's has abilities. That happens most times. People with, either psychic ability or intuitive ability or some kind of clairvoyant ability always draw in these energies. And this turns into, it can be a problem sometimes. Like I said, I've been working on a case now with these individuals for, I guess about 7 or 8 years. And it just, you can calm things down, but they just don't go away, even when they move. If you move to another location, these things, it may not be the same energy, but they're drawing energy in.
Right, they're attracted to them.
Sure, and they're beacons. And basically, when you have a family with kids and this ability is passed on to them, you got a lot of beacons in one place, and it happens. And when they grow up and move on, they usually have the same problem unless they learn how to control it. That's one thing I do with clients I work with. If they have children who have abilities, I do try to help them to realize what's going on and try to control it, because you're just not going to get rid of that. You've got to learn how to use it to your advantage and to not be scared of it, because you're going to see things.
People that have the ability to sense this sort of thing, to contact with, to have contact with spirits and that sort of thing, is there some way for them to actually make this stronger instead of, everyone's like, oh, I wish I didn't have this. I wish it would go away. But then you've got some people that have a small amount of it, but they wish they had more. Is there a way to make that ability stronger? I
think every person has some degree of psychic ability. I mean, some type of ability. If they want to, enhance it to some point, there's a lot of programs and stuff. I'd say find yourself a very good psychic medium who's open to discussing it with them, and then use some of the tools available to make your sensing more precise, more direct. I don't really know how to my abilities, to describe it, if I either like it or don't like it. I know there's some places I got to avoid sometimes. Funeral homes, no. Yeah. I mean, I have problems when I go to funeral homes. There'd be points of time when I have going to funerals, and these things are just basically trying to get your attention as you're there. And, it's kind of disconcerting. Antique stores, it's really bad in antique stores because of spirit and energy attachments to older items. Yeah. So, it can be go to a disadvantage at some point, but then again, it can kind of be a warning at some point too, where, you kind of get that early sense of, maybe I should not do this.
Yeah.
And it does work out sometimes, to that aspect of it.
Okay. I got you. Thank you, sir.
So let me ask you about this, because this is one of my very favorite subjects, and I noticed you actually had this on your blog today, but black-eyed kids. What are your thoughts on black-eyed kids?
I don't know. That's a good question. When I wrote my last book, Alien Disclosure, about the experiencers in dealing with all kinds of unusual, otherworldly activity, abductions and encounters with alien beings and such. I also look back at some of the other type of strangeness that what people can consider possibly being alien. Black-eyed kids, I don't know what they are. I don't know if they are some type of hybrid being. I didn't put it in the book as, because I'm really not sure.
Right.
It's just like these winged humanoids that people were seeing in Chicago or everywhere else. I guess I could have made a case for them being some type of otherworldly being, but I did not include that. One thing I did include was the Men in Black, because I do believe those are alien beings. And just from the things that I have heard and, talked to witnesses over the years. But as far as black-eyed kids, I really don't know what they, and it's just not kids too. I mean, it's
right.
It's all ages. Right. So, it's something that's become more prevalent in recent years. Though, it's like, again, I just don't think people were coming out and talking about it because they didn't want to be ridiculed.
Yeah.
What these beings are, I really don't know. But they do have certain aspects to them that kind of parallel others, like trying to get into houses, trying to manipulate some people who they come across. They seem to pop up in places you don't know how they got there. Those kind of run parallel as far as the sightings go. But, I have had people tell me that they've seen these these beings in all kinds of different places.
Really?
I probably got over 100 different sightings or more on the blog in my archives. It's, it does run it. There are a lot of different sightings.
That's fascinating. You know, one of the podcasts that I like to listen to is Astonishing Legends. And they had a really good series on the black-eyed kids. And I think it was something at the very end that somebody had written in, if I'm not mistaken. But they were talking about how they had made some kind of a correlation between I think it was the person's grandmother talking about the Fae and the lore that she had heard growing up. I think it was in another country or something, and the parallels, she had made some parallels between those and black-eyed kids or black-eyed beings. We say black-eyed kids, but yeah, like you said, there's more to it than that. But of course the kids are creepier to me. But anyways, you know, as far as the whole asking for permission to get in and you know, seeming to control the mind and just different things like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I had a report not long ago where the individual wondered if it was a fae.
Really?
Yeah. And I consulted a couple of researchers about that. Some believe that there's possibility, but others said they really don't know. So, and that's just something else that's out there. It may very well be a connection somehow.
Yeah, it's impossible to say. So it's definitely a fascinating subject. But you know, we're hearing so many more stories, and I know we're probably getting a little long. I don't want to keep you too long, but we're hearing all these stories about aliens and things like that, plus the paranormal. We talk about that more than ever, and now we're getting to the point where even our government admits, yes, there are UFOs. We're not saying they're aliens, but they're UFOs. Do you feel like we're getting closer to a point where a lot of this stuff is going to come above board and we're going to be, you know, we're going to find out the truth about some of this?
No. Honestly, I don't think it is. I think, you know, I've been saying this a lot lately. I think we're being spoon-fed by the government. These particular UFO sightings in military and such, the Navy, and you know, they disclosed these sightings out in the Pacific, and then they had some along the coast of the United States, the East Coast. I think they're just picking and choosing what they want to show us. I don't think they're going to really disclose that much. Let's put it this way: I don't think they're going to disclose anything of importance unless they absolutely have to. I mean, you know, E.T. lands on the White House lawn. That might be a point where they need to come clean.
Maybe.
You know. But as far as alien activity and otherworldly beings, I don't think you're going to get much at all out of the government. You know, that in my last book, I described a lot of that as far as disclosure just being a myth. You know, I think to the point where we start getting information, it's got to come from experiencers, people that come out and tell what they experience. That's where we're going to get the truth. Right. We're not going to get it from any agency or anything.
Right.
Even these reporting agencies, UFO reporting agencies like MUFON and NUFORC, they're not going to come out and tell you anything either. I mean, you know, they kind of shy away from the entity reports. So, you know.
Well, it seems like maybe they're kind of, you know, in cahoots with the government. And do you think
there's something there?
Yeah. Yeah, you burst Aaron's bubble. Poor Aaron.
I told her last episode, I'm like, within 10 years, we're going to have aliens walking around that we actually know about.
Well, I say 5. But, you know, you're so much more experienced in this kind of thing.
Yeah,
you've heard way more than we have over the past year, so you've probably been there and done that.
Well, I mean, you know, as far as aliens being part of us, I think for millennia they've been here with us. I think they're a part of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, like I said in the book, I describe a lot of that, some of the activity that I have seen, some of the things I have been told, and you know, I have worked with a lot of experiencers over the years, and there's something definitely going on, but it's not something that we're going to be told by the powers to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the same area where Calvin Parker was abducted, and he's actually a friend of ours, that we met through all this, and him and his wife they're awesome people. He's told us his story, and oh my gosh, we grew up on those stories, and we would think, well, it's robots and all this stuff, it's bull, and they were drunk and all this, but to sit in a room and have him tell you his story, something happened to that man.
Oh yeah, that Pascagoula incident.
It's amazing.
I have had 2 other witnesses come forth that had similar experiences the same day, the same evening, that lived in Mississippi.
In Pascagoula?
Around Pascagoula, not that specific location, but I've had 2 other people report to me, who I do believe were telling me the truth. I don't think they were just being copycats. I think what they saw and experienced may have been, this incident with the Pascagoula incident. I think this was part of a fleet type of encounter. I think it just wasn't one incident. I think there were several. And people just didn't want to come out and talk about it.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, just from reports in the general area, what I've read and what Mr. Parker has told me and that kind of thing. But I tell you, it's something to actually be in the room with somebody with, you can tell the emotion when he talks about it and everything. So it is fascinating.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to talk to people that have had experiences, and I'll be quite honest with you, the Gulf Coast in particular has seen a lot of real strange alien encounters. I've worked with a gentleman. I've been working with a gentleman for almost 10 years now, who lives just outside Pensacola. So that area, around Gulf Breeze and such have had heavy UFO activity. Plus, there's been a lot of entity activity as well. So, Gulf Coast, the whole way from Florida down into Texas has had a lot of incidents over the years.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's good stuff right there.
It is. And, you've talked about your books quite a bit. I've unfortunately not had the pleasure of reading your books yet, but I will get there. You've got them on your website, don't you?
Yeah, I do. The last book was Alien Disclosure, Experiencers Expose Reality. That was a book, had about 20 years of research in that book, including some of the incidents that have been described to me, plus some of the incidents I went through. And the book before that was Mothman Dynasty, Chicago's Winged Humanoids. And, you can buy both those books on Amazon. I've got 5 other books there as well. So if you just go to, go to Amazon and search my name, Lon Strickler, you'll find all of them there.
We're going to plug the hell out of them for you.
Yeah, we'll put links on our website, on our page. We do a page for each episode, and we'll put links on there, too, for anybody, so they can go to your page as well as the 5 books on Amazon.
I tell you, there is a phenomenon that's going on down in your area that I've been looking into recently. These upright canine, these dogman sightings. There has been a slew of sightings in and around Birmingham.
Really?
Yeah, and I mean a lot of them, and some of these reports are pretty harrowing as well. I don't know what is going on there. I have a guy who does get these reports from me, who lives in Birmingham, and he's been looking into it. But I will tell you that there have been a lot of sightings. And Mississippi itself has had a lot of activity increase too with these upright canines and Bigfoot. So as well the big cats. It's been a lot of big cat sightings in Mississippi over recent years. So it's out there.
We'll have to keep our ears open for those kinds of stories for sure. We sure appreciate you talking to us. And, I know it's been kind of a long little interview, but it's been fascinating.
Yeah.
So we sure appreciate it.
And no problem.
We appreciate everything you do. We'll keep on checking out that blog, and I can't wait to get the books.
Yeah. We'll get some info from your sites too. How
Yeah.
about
I appreciate it. You take care now and have a good week.
You too.
you too?
Okay, that was our interview with Lon Strickler.
Riveting, wasn't it?
It was awesome. It
I
really
think I was amazing.
I've been looking forward to this interview for a while, and I was really excited because I've been reading his blog. I haven't read his books yet, but I am going to read his books. I'm going to start getting those, but his blog is really fascinating. I mean, he gets reports from all over the world, about...
Speaking of all over the world, I mean, I don't mean to jump on your coattails here, but, we were talking earlier about all of our listeners, and we've got listeners basically around the world.
We do. It's amazing.
I know.
Places I've not even necessarily heard of.
Like New Zealand. Who even knew there was a New
Who's heard
Zealand?
of New Zealand?
What happened to Old Zealand?
Good question.
That's what I want to know.
I would love to visit New Zealand.
Yeah, I know it'd be
Beautiful
awesome.
place.
They don't have a military.
Really
right?
cool people, too.
If I'm remembering correctly, they don't have a military, so you can go there with like one F-14 Tomcat and basically take over the country.
No, we're not going to do that.
They got a million sheep.
Don't listen to Aaron.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that.
Aaron is brainless.
New Zealand seems awesome. Looks like a beautiful country.
Yeah, but it is cool when we look and we break down, where our listeners
it's like we got people
a
in
huge
Sweden,
amount of our
Thailand.
listeners are in New York.
Yeah, New York.
Go figure. They're probably making fun of our accent.
Yeah, like, listen
but
to-
hey, we'll take
listen
it.
to them
You
hicks
listen
over
to us,
there.
you can make fun of us all you want to.
Oh, yeah.
That's fine. We make fun of our accent.
I tried to do
Especially
a New York
Aaron's.
accent that sounded Cajun.
Aaron's accent's funnier than mine.
Do I have an accent?
You have a thick accent.
Really?
Yeah.
Because everyone tells me I don't have an accent.
You do have an accent, but actually you don't sound Cajun. Like I said before, you sound more Mexican or something than Cajun.
Like when I get pissed.
You look more Mexican than Cajun.
When I get pissed, I can hear my accent. When I record it, I'm like,
then it comes
hey,
out.
what's up with that, man? Y'all got my scramps, huh? Y'all got them all on my scramp. Yeah.
Earl of my scramp.
Earl of my scramp.
Oh, I can't pass a shrimp stand without saying that.
That's pretty
You
damn
got Earl of
funny.
my scramp.
That's good shit right there.
Can you imagine just every shrimp stand that you go by just yelling that out to them as you
Y'all
drive
got them
by?
all on my scramp.
See what they say.
I love Trey Parker.
Oh, we
and Matt
got to
Stone.
start doing that.
You know what we need to do?
What?
We need to try to get an interview with Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, like
Can
we
you
need,
imagine?
Yeah, we need to work on that.
Yeah, I'm going to let you work on that one.
Ah, shit.
You were hoping
I'm
I
already
would,
spread so thin, but I'm going to
That
drop
would- yeah.
everything just for that.
That would be awesome, though. We could try.
That'd be
I don't
awesome.
know.
Those
But
guys are friggin' hilarious, man. I love them.
anyways, so that's our show for today. We want to give a shout out to several different people. We want to first of all give a shout out to Never Ready Media for letting us use your equipment and your space. We want to give a shout out to Never Ready Gamers for the same reason. And we want to give a shout out to Hermit Radio. Check out Hermit Radio. That is a really good podcast. He is a very positive person and he talks about lots of things to make your life better. So check out Hermit Radio on pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. And we also want to give a shout out to 10-ish Podcast. 10-ish Podcast is a cool podcast. It's comedy and knowledge mixed together. It gives you lots of top 10 lists, fun facts, and that kind of thing. So check them out, and they should be available pretty much anywhere podcasts are found as well. 10-ish Podcast. The last group we want to give a shout out to today is Bad Rad Movies Podcast. The Bad Rad Movies Podcast, they talk about movies, whether they're bad or they're good, and they like to talk about obscure movies that people haven't heard of, especially like old horror movies and things like that, or old action movies. So check them out anywhere podcasts are found as well. So that's basically our episode for today.
Yeah.
And, Aaron, don't burn the roo.
Don't burn the roo, guys.
I said it first this time.
Yeah, I know.
Wow, that don't seem right.
Don't burn the roo, guys.
It's a weird day. Don't burn the roo.
Y'all have a nice one.